What's going on, guys? Rich Butler here. Welcome to a brand new episode of Toys and Tech of the Trade, your one-stop shop for toys, talk, and tech with some assembly required. If this is your first time listening to this podcast, we take a dive into the technology that people use to create content, run their business, and just lead more productive lives. And then we explore the toys that put a smile on their face. And toys is always in quotes because it could be anything from action figures to cars, tools, guns, whatever the case may be. Whatever you're into, those might be your toys, and we definitely love talking about that kind of stuff. Before we get into this week's guest, a couple of items of note. This podcast was supposed to be released next week, but we're releasing it early just because our guest for this episode is publishing his first book, and I really wanted to get his message out there and really help drive the point home that his book and his podcast, for that matter, are just items that are definitely very, very useful, very actionable, and, you know, things that I would like people to check out. Plus, I want to increase the signal for more people to engage and see what he's all about. So that's why this podcast is coming out a little earlier. The schedule going forward, as I mentioned in a previous episode, is going to be every other Tuesday. That is the plan, every 2 weeks basically. And we're going to have a variety of guests on deck from different facets of life, whether it's wrestling, acting, vloggers, bloggers, YouTubers. It's going to be a wild ride over the coming weeks. And, we definitely look forward to sharing it with you. We still have two more of our RageWorks creators on deck. Ben and Taylor from Black is the New Black and Josie's Boy from Call Me When It's Over are slated to be on deck as future guests sooner rather than later for each of them, so be on the lookout for that. I want to thank those of you that have taken the time to listen to the show and rate the show on iTunes. We truly, truly appreciate it. And if you have 5 seconds you like what we're doing, just hop on iTunes or the podcast service of choice and rate the show. If you want to write a review, great. If you just want to hit 5 stars because we delivered some great content, that's awesome. But if you want to hit us with a 1 star because we didn't bring the noise this episode, that's all good, man. We appreciate all the engagement. New people that have joined the fan page, the Facebook group, you guys are awesome. And once again, I appreciate it. All right, with that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about our guest before we kick this interview off. My guest, Gregg Clunis, host of Tiny Leaps, Big Changes podcast, also author, congratulations, Greg, you made it, of Tiny Leaps, Big Changes, the book. Basically, Gregg's work involves, you can't look at it as a self-help book or podcast because what he tries to do is explore just people's behaviors and how you can do small little things to just be better. Or in his case, and to quote him, things that you can implement to start moving the needle towards your biggest goals. And I want to just put that in a way that's easy to digest for some of you guys. If you're on that New Year's resolution kick and you want to lose weight and you realize, oh man, how am I going to get to the gym? A 10-minute walk. You could start with a 10-minute walk. You could start waking up half an hour earlier and doing some push-ups or some calisthenics, or, maybe it's instead of drinking 5 sodas a day, you're drinking 3 sodas a day until you get down to 2 sodas a day, 1 soda a day, whatever the case may be. If you're looking to start that business, maybe it's as easy as buying the domain name first, or maybe starting it as a blog first and then growing from there. Again, to quote what Gregg says, tiny leaps lead to big changes. And it's so true. And it's something so simple that many of us get caught up in because we get stuck we get in our own way, honestly. Paralysis analysis. So it's like, what about this? What about this thing? And before you know it, we've accomplished nothing. I feel that what Gregg is trying to get out there, the message he's trying to convey is something that's super actionable, super super close to home for me personally for a variety of reasons. And in this podcast, we definitely did that. We did talk business, we talked toys, we talked tech, and, we talked loss and a lot of other personal stuff. And, I'm truly grateful that Gregg went down that path on this episode with us and was willing to share so much of himself, because that's, that was huge. But you guys aren't here to listen to my nonsense. You're here to listen to the guest. So without any further ado, let's turn it over to Gregg and learn about the toys and tech of his trade. All right, I'm joined by my guest for this episode, Gregg Clunis. As many of you know from the intro, Gregg is a podcaster, content creator, author, musician, man of many hats. I want to start off by thanking Gregg for taking the time to chop it up with us. What's going on, man?
Dude, Rich, thank you so much for having me. This is something that I'm glad we finally could make happen. We've obviously been in each other's worlds for a couple of years now, so I'm pumped to finally be able to make something happen with us. Yeah,
it's crazy that this all started from the New York podcast meetup, which has since evolved into so many different things. The guy who used to run it, Scott, doesn't run it anymore. There's a new guy that's running it. And then a new podcasting group opened up, and it's just been a very large evolving landscape for the podcast space here in New York City. With you, I think I saw you at a few events, and then I kind of felt that you, much like myself and a few others, were ahead of the class because we either had projects in motion, had been in the game for a while, or were just, well versed in it from other avenues. And for you, I kind of want to get into the origins of that. You have your podcast, which obviously, it's something that you're super passionate about. And then you're also launching a book. You're doing a bunch of stuff. So let's get into, I guess we'll start with the podcasting space. What drove you to that? Where did you get your start in that particular space?
Yeah. So it's an interesting story. And how far back it goes kind of depends on the story you want to hear. But the short version of it is 9 years ago, I was a senior in high school. I had just gotten my license and needed to buy a car like many other seniors need to do. Yep. And my cousin at the time was doing this thing called internet marketing. And at the time, what that meant was setting up websites, reviewing products, and linking to them to get a commission on the sale. So he introduced me to it, taught me how to get into it, and I did it for that summer and walked away with enough money to buy my first car. So naturally, as a teenager about to graduate high school, like I'm hooked. Like, holy wow, I can make money on the internet. That's crazy. And that sort of kicked off what has been a 9-year journey of doing other things related to business, related to marketing, and really like diving into the world of entrepreneurship. And so fast forward, I graduate college, I take a job in marketing, and I'm sitting at my desk, bored out of my mind. There's just like not enough work. There's just not enough work for many entry level jobs out there. Sure. And so I'm doing nothing, and I feel like, wow, I'm really wasting my life here. Like this sucks. And so I'm looking for content to consume, stuff on entrepreneurship, inspirational stuff, success stuff. And I stumbled across podcasting in that moment because YouTube wasn't an option, because I couldn't sit and watch a video with my boss walking around.
Absolutely.
So audio made sense. So I got into it and I started listening to everything. And this is before Serial popped off. So the landscape was very different then than it is now, as you remember. And so I get into it, and I'm the type of person who, once I'm obsessed with something, I become obsessed with it, and I need to do it. I need to be a part of the conversation. I can't just be a consumer of it. So a couple weeks in, I decided, you know what, I'm going to launch my own podcast. And I joined a course to learn the basics, realized that I had actually already known a lot of it from previous projects. And I had, thankfully, some audio editing experience working with music. And so I decided to jump in, launched a show within about a month. And it was terrible. It It was an absolutely terrible show. It was not fun for me to make. It was not fun for the guests to be on, and it was not fun for anybody to listen to. So I ran it for about 2 months, decided to end it, and started working with clients just to stay in the space, make a little extra income alongside the job, so on and so forth. And then fast forward even further, 3 shows later of my own, and I believe at that time 25 shows for clients. And then I launched Tiny Leaps, my current show. And so it was a long journey that started 9 years ago with just learning how to create content that culminated through a series of random events in me creating audio content that has now sort of created all the future opportunities that are popping up.
How were you soliciting clients back then? And the reason I ask is because, the podcasting space, and this as much as I do, a lot of people jump in, they think, oh, I'll spend, a couple $100 on equipment and boom, instant profit. And obviously that is not the case. People don't understand it's a slow grind. How did you parlay that experience into, obtaining client work? Because I remember when we met, you were working with clients and talking about audio production at the time. And this was a few years back already. So how are you actively seeking that out when it's not a skill that people just say, hey, I need somebody to master audio for me? Were you going through groups or, Facebook, social media?
Yeah. So that's the thing. And the landscape has changed so much because now there is an active demand. There are people like I launch new shows for clients, people who have never hosted a podcast in the past. The minute they launch, like day off and their show is doing well, they get emails of people saying, hey, can you teach me how to launch a podcast? Like it's nuts how many people are out there looking now compared to your point. When I first started, there was nobody. Like podcasting was becoming a thing, and
right.
It was pre-serial, so it hadn't really gotten into culture yet, but it was dismal. And so for me, I got my start with doing the freelance side of it, focusing on communities, on groups, and being a part of the community, giving value. At the time, the only value I could give was that I was able to get shows from idea to iTunes very quickly. I was able to sit down and figure out, well, what matters, what doesn't, and shelf all the things that don't matter and focus exclusively on what does matter. And so that gave me a little bit of a competitive advantage compared to the person who you signed on as a client and all of a sudden you need to take 3 months to launch a show. And my pricing was a terrible decision from a business point of view,
yep.
But
that's what happened.
For the client, it was cheap, and so they're going to work with me. And that honestly led to it was relationships, it was Facebook groups, and being active in the community, trying to create content for that community and provide value for that community. And to this day, I haven't posted in that first group in maybe a year and a half, but I still get messages from people that are like, hey, I've seen your posts in this group and I know that you're an expert in this area. And so it's incredible when you sit down to create value comes back at you. So that's what I would do if I were starting again, honestly, is jump into Facebook groups, jump into these places where your customers are all populated and crowding, or like it's a watering hole.
Right.
Like somebody came into the middle of the desert, built a watering hole, and then said, hey, look, all of your customers are around this watering hole and it's free. So why not go in and see if you can get some stuff to happen?
No, it was interesting because as I did research for our interview, I was reading the origin of Tiny Leaps, and I want to dig into that a little deeper, because it's interesting the way that you streamline productivity for that particular show. I like that most of them are bite-sized, easily consumable episodes you could listen to on a walk, a run, or a commute. I really wanted to commend you for that, because you don't get in your own way when it comes to personal development. I think a lot of people, they when they talk about personal development, they kind of get in their own way. And in particular, I wanted to talk about the episodes where you talked about the loss of your dad.
Yeah.
All professionalism aside, man, that touched me on a different level, because I went through that, so I wanted to tell you that those episodes for me were probably so close to home that I like when you put out the third one, I'm like, you know what? I'm not even in the right headspace to listen to this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Because what ends up happening, and you know this as well as I do, you know, holidays come around, reminders come around, and your head just messes with you in that context. And I felt that, you know, part of the coping mechanism is finding other people that have endured and gone through it and don't want to hear the, oh, you know, we're sorry. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to hear it from your perspective in such a public fashion, man, you know, all the stuff we're talking about in the interview aside, I really wanted to tell you that was probably the most resonating piece of content from you for me.
Dude, thank you so much for saying that. And I'll be honest, I think I mentioned this and so for those of you listening, he's referring to a series I did called Losing a Loved One.
Yep.
On my podcast because unfortunately my father passed away in October of 2017 and I was terrified to put that out. Like being perfectly honest, I was horrified. And I don't say that just as like I feel like that's become a talking point of, oh, I was so scared to be vulnerable. No, I did not want to do it. My aunt forced me to do it. And I didn't want to do it because it meant having to deal with these things. And it meant having to face these things. And then there is also on top of that, the feeling of, well, I'm being selfish and my audience doesn't care about this. They just want this content and blah, blah, blah. And I'll tell you what you just said about it being the thing that resonated most with you, the amount of messages and emails, because in that first one, I specifically asked people not to tell me that they were sorry for my loss.
Yep, because that doesn't do, you know, it's great because people feel empathy. And for me personally, I'm just like, you know, it got to a point where they'd be like, oh, sorry for your loss. I'm like, you didn't kill her, you know? Like,
exactly. And that's the thing. Like, I know it's coming from a good place and I know it's coming from a place of not knowing what to do.
Exactly.
But in that moment, especially when I was first going through it, it just made it worse somehow.
100%.
And so I just didn't want to hear it. But in lieu of that, or rather instead of that, people sent me their own stories. Like I got messages on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on email of people who 4 months prior had lost a parent, who 3 months prior had lost a brother. And they were willing to share this with me because I shared it with them.
Yep.
And we're talking about how me describing what I was going through, which I'll be honest, I haven't even listened to those episodes. I can't go back and do it.
You know, it's tough.
I can't.
It's tough because when, you know, for me, I'm well ahead in that. I lost my mom, 18 years ago now. So I get it. And the worst part is like sometimes, you know, I'll use personal experience for some of my other content and talk about some stuff and people be like, you know, man, it's pretty cool. You shared that, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, it's good to get that feedback. But when you listen back to it, you don't want to live through it. You know, it's like the person that saves the voicemail from that particular you know what I mean? Like a voicemail from a family member. Yeah, so that's the thing.
Like right now I have an old iPhone that I will never get rid of because I have voicemails from my dad on it. Yep. And that was one of the big things that I realized immediately afterwards was, holy crap, I'm never going to hear his voice again.
Yep.
Like all of a sudden this random voicemail of him wishing me a happy birthday and being an idiot is the most valuable thing in the world.
Yep. And I like what you had said and you know, I knew we were kind of going to veer off into this conversation because I liked what you had said about, you know, just doing it now for you because you were past the point of trying to do it for them. Yeah. You know, because I remember, you know, I used to tell my mom, yeah, you know, when I make it, I'm going to buy you this big screen TV and your own house, you know what I mean? And all this stuff. And obviously you reach that point where, you know, the father time has other plans. And the thing about it is when you come to that realization, you realize like, listen, you can't live for them. You got to live for you. Mm-hmm. So, you know, like to hear that from another person that was thinking the same way I was like, I'm like, holy shit, that's good. Because you know what happens? Sometimes you sit there and when, you know, you said that you were a better person after it, you know, to anybody who hasn't walked in those shoes, they'll be like, really, you're a better person after that? That's a traumatic or, you know, heartbreaking experience or whatever. But as crazy as it sounds, man, I'm with you, you know, because iron sharpens iron. And at the end of the day, you know, those are the things that kind of chisel you out of cookie dough into granite,
Yeah, because that's the thing. Like you never have to, up until something like that happens. There are very few moments in life where you have to face who you actually are.
Yep.
Very few moments. Like what the hardships we go through on a day-to-day basis are on the surface so ridiculous. Like we don't ever really have to deal with the person we actually are. And so after he passed, and now I'm flooded with all the grief and regret and so on and so forth, but then also the thought of, holy crap, he made most of the money. Like, what's my mom going to do? I need to make sure I'm able to take care of her. And like my sister is really taking it even harder than I did, and or handling it differently. Like you have all these thoughts, and all of a sudden you're like, I've been a child all this time.
It's like trial by fire.
I never once even considered any of these things until he died.
Yep. That was without a doubt the craziest thing for me. I think when my mother passed, I was 19, and it was just like, yeah, she was sick beforehand, and I kind of prepped, but you don't really prep, and that's what happens.
No,
and then,
there's no prep for it.
Yeah, man, there's zero prep, but everybody's like, yeah, but but you kind of know what's going to happen. Yeah, but it's different, it's like waking up and saying, hey, one day I'm going to die. Yeah, you are, but that doesn't mean that if somebody told you, hey, you got a week, that you're going to be prepared. It's crazy that a lot of people use that type of a thought process, but to hear it from you, like I said, I was like, wow, he gets it, and being better for it, you look back and you're like, man, if, this person would have still been here, I wouldn't have been able to do this because they would have been doing it. Like, think about this, like in your case, you became the provider in your house, your strategy, how you approach money, how you approached, bills, responsibilities, it all changed because the landscape of your life changed.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that, for you, like I said, it resonated so much for me because I was like, man, he gets it, man. He gets it. And to put it so public was, it's a word that's cliched now, courageous, everybody leverages, right. Oh, you're courageous for no, you are, because that's something that not too many people can discuss freely.
Yeah. And I mean, I hesitate to even accept that because I don't even think it was courageous. I think that I was like, I say this all the time now that I'm a year and a couple months out. I don't even remember last October, October 2017. I remember the day of being in the hospital by his bedside, and we were there for hours with his dead body there. And I of course remember the funeral. Everything in between is kind of just it happened. And so me recording, which literally was the next day, like the day of, I woke up, was going into work, got the text from my mom that he passed out. Got off the train and called immediately, and she was screaming and saying he's not breathing and so on and so forth. And sprinted to let my boss know, like, I'm out. Went into Grand Central, barely made the train that I was aiming for. Like, literally, I got to Grand Central with a minute until the train pulls out. And I feel so bad to this day because I remember sprinting through and I slammed into this old lady. And she thankfully didn't fall or anything, but I just didn't care in that moment.
Yep. Because your headspace was elsewhere.
I'm making this damn train.
Yep.
And I make it, and I'm so glad I did because it happened to be the train my aunt was sitting on.
Oh, well, there you go.
And so when I got the news that he passed on the train, and I didn't know she was on that train, and so this the ticketing guy is walking by, and I just get off the phone with the news. And he's trying to make jokes with me. He doesn't know, obviously.
No,
but
of course.
He's just trying to enjoy his life and make jokes. And I'm sitting here with this shadow over me.
Yep. Stewing in your own sadness.
Literally 30 seconds of knowledge that he passed away. And this guy, unfortunately, is trying to make, it's the weirdest timing.
Yep. The bitter end.
And I just glare at him. And I get up afterwards and I start walking to the restroom. And I see my aunt sitting there. And she was just like an angel sitting in the back of this train randomly because I had someone that I could just break down crying with.
Yep.
And so I did that. And I just I remember that day so vividly in every single detail, but the rest of the month I have no clue what happened. And the very next day when I recorded it, I couldn't even tell you what I said in it, honestly.
Man,
Like, I have no clue. I know it was all real, but I have no clue what I said or how I got back to the apartment from upstate New York. Like, I have no idea.
I'll give you a personal insight. I was convinced by my mother's cousin back then to record the funeral like an idiot. So I recorded it on, little mini VHS. And I tell you, dude, there's a bag full of VHS tapes and they have like birthday parties and all this stuff. I can't even go through them because I know, because they're not labeled. I know that one of them is the grenade, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not trying to do that. and mind you, this is now 18 years later, like it's like, oh, to help you remember or help you heal. No, the hell it won't. So for you,
the hardest thing for me, actually.
Yeah. What's that?
In the very beginning, it was the realization that it does never get easier.
Nope.
Because I started to have these conversations with people that were 20 years out, 15 years out, 10 years out, when I was 2 months out. And up until it happens, you sort of have this thought in the back of your mind that, if it happens, one day it'll get easier. But then you talk to someone who's 25 years out and like they still feel exactly the same. And they're like, oh, so I just have to suffer with this for the rest of my life? That sucks.
Yeah. Well, here's
and, that was so hard to wrap my head around.
Well, I'm going to ask you this and we'll kind of shift it forward, but Did it make you angry? Were you mad? And I ask because some people, they're just like, some people felt it was relief. You know what I mean? Some people felt it, relief for the person, obviously. Were you mad? Like that something was taken from you? And I ask because some people process it differently. Cause I tell you, man, I was pissed off for a long time.
Yeah. So, and this is a good transition. You mentioned in the intro that I was a musician. And I wouldn't even call myself a musician, but I like to make music projects.
Right.
And one of the things I did to help myself cope was create a mixtape, a hip hop mixtape that just documented basically all the feelings I had. And so anger was a chief part of it because of the way it happened. Like he was diagnosed with lung cancer and all signs pointed positive. He was on the mend. He had survived the surgery. He had survived rounds of chemo, rounds of radiation, and he was more or less healthy.
Right.
The weekend I saw him, which was the weekend right before he passed away on a Tuesday, I saw him the previous weekend. He was fine. He was healthy. According to my family, on Monday he was even energetic, like eating properly and so on and so forth. And he passed away on the Tuesday. And we didn't do an autopsy, so we don't actually know like what the cause was.
Right.
But they think it could be one of two things, both of which were preventable if there was better medical care. And there were two big failures. One was the overall like medical team that was working with him, with the exception of one guy, his surgeon who did the big surgery. Like he actually showed up at his funeral, and I'm so grateful to that guy to this day. But the rest of the medical team was just not prepared. And then the second big failure, and possibly the most important one, was the transport, the ambulance. So when they came, they were ill-equipped. They had two people driving, two people riding with it, and the person who was responsible to get him into the back of it could not do it. So actually, my mom and my brother-in-law had to do it. She had never dealt with a situation where somebody was at risk of dying, so she just didn't know what to do. She froze.
Yep.
And they didn't turn on the siren until, like, we lived maybe a 35 minute drive from the hospital, maybe even more, 40 minutes. They didn't turn on the siren until 20 minutes into it.
Oh, jeez.
So there are all these questions of what if?
Yep. Lots of what ifs.
You can never get those answered. So at some point you have to let them go. But there was so much anger because in my mind, it wasn't even like, oh, well, it could have gone. No, it wasn't supposed to go this way.
Right. Every
Every single sign pointed to the opposite. And I just wake up one morning and he's gone. And then I hear that all of these failures happened in addition to that. And so one of the songs on the mixtape was called Enemy. and it was, sorry, that was a working name. It was called Execution, and it was my vocal attack at everyone who was responsible, or at least played some role. Because ultimately, and this is where I need to get real, he was responsible.
Yeah, exactly.
He started smoking when he was a teenager and kept it up and never quit up until he got diagnosed. So I'm more mad at him than I am anybody else. As much as I love and miss him, like I'm pissed because I remember being a kid, like hiding his cigarettes and making a very, very strong effort to help him quit. And so I'm like, it's ultimately his fault, and I talk about that in that song. Like I attack him as well, but in addition to that, the medical system failed him. Yeah,
I see, and that's the, hearing you share that, which I truly appreciate. The parallels are very similar. My mom was a 2-pack a dayer.
Dang.
Yeah. So and I remember the bodegas in the neighborhood, they kind of knew who I was, so she would send me if she couldn't go, to the store, and they'd be like, all right, I know who it's for. You know what I mean? Like, so it's exactly that. You kind of just go off that mental checklist and you're just like, damn, you did this, and maybe I should have done this, and maybe if I would have done more of this, then this would have happened. And the worst part was, it's like paralysis analysis. You just drive yourself crazy. And then one day you just wake up and you're like, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And, to transition, I feel that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I feel that you threw yourself into work because that became a driving force to kind of, now that you were a provider in a way, you knew that this was too big to fail at this point. Am I right?
Yeah. And I mean, it was complicated because there was this element of, and I talk about, the first song on that mixtape is called Combat, and it's the day it happened, me basically saying, okay, you're gone, I need to take over. And there was 100% that mindset. But also the timing is never great, but the timing was especially shitty. Because 2017, until that happened, was the greatest year of my life. Like, I got my book deal in 2017. I was in talks to host a TV show. Like, I had all of these incredible opportunities just falling on my plate. And then unfortunately he passed. But what that meant was I was in the middle of all of these opportunities.
Yep.
So I didn't feel like I could stop to grieve and to give myself the time I needed, because it felt like if I took my foot off the pedal, the momentum would go away and it would all fall apart. And so I put my head down and worked, because I knew that at some point my mom's life insurance that she got from him would run out, but also because I couldn't afford to throw away these opportunities that I'd worked so hard for.
Yep.
And I know he wouldn't have wanted me to do that. Like, if and I'm not positive where I land on the does heaven exist or not thing, but if it does and he's up there and I just crumbled as a result of this and lost all these opportunities, he would have been pissed.
Give you a kick in the ass.
He would have come down and punched me in the face.
Yep. That's the thing that, it's interesting, because as I dug into your story, I saw that, it's almost like peaks and valleys where you kind of see where your content had a particular shift, because I definitely feel that after that, the part one, you started doing more wellness stuff. I noticed there's definitely a more increase in wellness. And I feel like, as I, both physical and mental well-being. And I said to myself that your content shift, while intentional, was also unintentional, because you're like, all right, I'm going to dive into this work and I'm going to put out the best stuff possible. But under the surface, it was like, maybe people need to know about this because of this.
Well, so that's the thing, right? And it's interesting because I've always held on to the fact that my show's job, its first job, is to allow me to satisfy my own curiosity.
Yep.
That's why I started it.
100%.
And my curiosity tends to be around, and I don't even like describing my show as like a self-help thing. Like, I think it's really about human behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe
Absolutely.
that when you understand human behavior, you can then help yourself do better behaviors. And so it's interesting that you point out this shift, because it wasn't intentional at all.
Right.
but I was in this place of pushing myself harder, doubling down on things, like really, really committing. And at the time I was working full time, I had just gotten this amazing new job at the that I was working at the time. And between that and writing the book and building a side business, my agency, and serving the community and grieving and trying to support my family and blah, blah, blah. I needed more support in the emotional well-being side of things. And so because, like you said, subconsciously, like that's what I needed, that naturally became the content I created, because the show is meant to document me and what I'm doing and what I'm struggling with and the things I need to learn and master. And by doing that, because it is real and because it is my day to day, people then resonate with it because they're going through the same thing.
Yep. I like the fact that, your show, it's not that it's manufactured. You know what I mean? It's not, it's not, Z Morning Zoo. You know what I mean? Like it's not manufactured. Like it comes from a genuine place, picked apart from genuine experiences. 5 reasons to do squats. It was one that jumped out for me as a gym rat. As someone who's been a master of picking things up and putting things down since I was, 14. I hear stuff like that. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. That's a departure from some of the other stuff, like a lot of them jumped out. I liked, What to Do When You Change and Your Friends Don't. Another very, very personal episode, because you realize that, you evolve and the people that are around you, sometimes they choose not to. It's funny for me because, I before my mother passed, I had found that, I was adopted, and she actually adopted me before she passed, like 2 weeks before, like legally, just to make sure that, I could, carry on for her when she was gone, which is insane. But, here I am, 18 years old walking into a courtroom, and I ended up, when I became the guardian for my sisters, the same guy that did the same judge, he saw me back 2 weeks later and he's like, oh man, I know why you're here. Like it was crazy. And, I started, I guess, just out of curiosity to close my own loop, reconnecting with my biological siblings, and some were better off than others, and it's funny because, you try and tell these people, and without trying to make it seem like you're doing better, you kind of want to impart some wisdom on them, and the worst part is it's exactly that. Like sometimes people just don't want to evolve, and you gotta cut them off, because then.
So, I mean, this is something that, I've been thinking about a lot because I was at an event recently, and I asked the presenter, this woman who is the chief heart officer at Vaynermedia.
Oh, wow. It's funny you bring up that exact person because
Yeah, so I was asking her. She was giving a presentation on like how she builds culture and inspires this sort of switch to prioritizing soft skills, so things like empathy and so on and so forth. And I wanted to ask her, with her culture building approach, how you can basically apply that to building an audience instead of building a team. And so where that ended up was changing my understanding of basically there's a balance to be found between being an influencer and being a community builder. And it's two separate ends of the spectrum. And so somebody like a Gary Vee, like he's very extreme to the influence side of things.
Yep.
And in order to get there, you kind of have to elevate yourself a little bit. You kind of have to like not present yourself as like, oh, I'm better than you, but give people a reason to look up to you, because that's ultimately what drives their action. Is, do they feel either consciously or subconsciously that you're someone worth listening to, and that you have their best interest in heart and that you can help them?
Yep.
And by being elevated, they see all of those things and therefore they take more action. On the other end of the spectrum, you have community builders that don't elevate themselves from their group at all. They are a part of the group.
Right.
But the hard thing is that the community builder, since they're not seen as influential, they don't have as much power to drive action. And so what I've been realizing for my content is I need to do a better job of finding that balance between the two, because ultimately I do want to be a part of my community, and that's what I do well now. But I want them to take action. I want them to do stuff, because that's ultimately what gets them the results that they want.
Yep.
And so I need to add a little bit more of the, again, not I'm better than you, but here's why you should listen to me aspect of things. And that's a tough balance to find, but it's something I'm starting to realize is actually, it plays a bigger role than I originally thought.
Yeah, you want to be the guy, you want to go from the guy holding the sword to the guy leading the charge. And it's tough because, you know, that level of disconnect is sometimes you get lost in that. And, you know, it's funny. I had a weird Gary Vee experience, but you know, aside from that, you know, it's weird because especially like in your group, you know, your Facebook group, like you create questions, you create engagement, and you'll lead the charge. But occasionally you'll pop in and somebody will write something, and sometimes it's right or wrong. And you'll be like, listen, you know, thanks for sharing that, but, you know, it might be better if you approach it like this. And that's kind of where you take off your leader hat and you jump into the trenches, which is good. And I think that's, you know, that's a big part of why you've been doing so well in a lot of your endeavors, because what you end up doing is you put yourself in both pairs of shoes, the shoes of the leader and the shoes of the person, you know, searching in the dark with a flashlight.
Yeah.
And I think
yeah,
it's helped a lot, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, the reason I started the show was I was sick of self-help. I was sick of the personal development industry. And I thought that it was going too far in the influencer side of things. Like I got a lot of value from Tony Robbins growing up. He was the one, his book inspired me to get into entrepreneurship and really think more about taking control of my life. And this was when I was 13. So a lot of value has come from him, but I mean, I don't need to tell you or your audience how cultish his people can be.
Absolutely.
I think that's a broken model.
Yeah, I think the problem is that, you know, too many people drink the Kool-Aid, so to speak. And the problem with that is that these guys, you know, the Gary V's, all of these guys, they want you to drink the Kool-Aid, but once you've had your fill, they want you to move on.
Right.
Like that's the whole point, you know. It's like even with your content, you give people the tools. Hey, this is what you got to do to be better. And you know, I appreciate you sticking around and contributing to my community and being a part of my community. But once I've solved your issue, you know, it's almost like then the student becomes the teacher. You want 100%. Them to go off and you want them to do this stuff. So, you know, a question I was curious about was, you know, in the origins of your podcast, you had talked about that you were reading a book on the subway. Was it a Tony Robbins book that you were reading?
No.
What were you reading? Because you didn't mention it, and I was like, I'm going to ask him.
So I won't give the name and I won't give the author.
Okay, fair enough.
It's somebody that I know personally.
I see.
So I don't want there to be any hard feelings about it.
Oh,
but it was
gotcha.
It was a new book at the time. And the big focus around it, as you heard, but for your audience, was that if you pursue your passion, life is basically going to be amazing, and you're going to be excited to get up every morning and work on your thing. And that's just not true.
Nope.
It's just
no,
not.
sir.
And so that's and by the way, that wasn't the reason I started the show. It was more of like a last straw kind of thing.
Right. Like, it was it. Like that was the last one.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what really set me off, even more so than the book itself, so it was self-published, and it just made me realize how easy it is to get a message into the world, which then made me realize that, holy crap, that's going to lead to a lot of really bad messages that people are going to act on.
It's insane.
And
how
so I
that's
started
changed.
the show almost as like an antidote to bad messaging in how you actually improve your life.
Yeah, I think that's pretty, first of all, that's a ballsy way to look at it, because what happens is a lot of people, they automatically grab a book, and especially to your point, now that self-publishing has become, not turnkey, so to speak, but definitely a lot easier than it was, where, you know, people's information isn't being as vetted as much. Like sometimes I'll download an ebook from Amazon for $1, you know, because it's related to a content I like, to content I like, and I read it. And, you know, it's whatever, 25 pages, 50 pages. And I go, okay, did nobody fact check or talk to this person and tell them that that's not good to talk about, you know?
Yeah. And that's the thing is like that, to me, it raises this big question. ultimately, I think that having no gatekeepers is a good thing. But it does raise this question of, well, there were valuable aspects to gatekeepers, so how can we replace that? Because having to go through a traditional publisher and get quote unquote chosen meant that you had a filter.
Right.
Like you couldn't just say anything in the world regardless. And that, by the way, one of the issues I had with this book was he was saying a lot of stuff that maybe was true, but he wasn't revealing that a lot of the people featured had safety nets. And by that, I don't even mean that they were rich.
Right.
Like I have a safety net.
Yep.
Because I have a good relationship with my mother. So if my business fails, she's never going to let me be homeless.
Yep. She'll be like, yo, come back. Simple. It's true.
Exactly. And so I have a safety net, and a lot of people that he mentioned had an even bigger safety net, but he never talked about that. And that's what I think bothered me the most, was someone who really truly does not have a safety net. Maybe both their parents aren't alive anymore. Maybe they just have a crappy relationship with their family. Maybe they have 7 kids and their husband is about to walk out, and like they have no savings, but they read this book and maybe a few others like it and decide, you know what, the secret is I need to find my passion. So then they quit their job at the mailroom to go start a business, but they have none of the skills required to start a business. They don't know how to sell anything. They don't know how to develop a product. They don't know how to serve a client. And so all of a sudden, 3 months later, they're on food stamps.
Yep. And then it becomes wow, first it becomes, well, I'm going to blame everyone else and not blame myself. And that's because sometimes, you take an idea and you should write it down, and you should say to yourself, okay, I wrote this idea down. How do I get there? To your point, tiny leaps. All right. Well, I want to run my own business. Okay, what should I do? Well, let me go online, see what kind of free white paper and ebook is out there to start running and little pieces, because at the end of the day, if you jump in it blind, you're going to get caught out there. I mean, I remember, when that book, The Secret, dropped, a lot of people were like, yeah, man, you got to do this and put good vibes into the world and they'll come back. I'm like, yeah, that's great, but good vibes don't pay the rent.
Exactly. And that's my other big problem is, like, after The Secret dropped, and maybe it was there before, but I wasn't paying attention to it, there became this like movement of, well, you just got to think positive and manifest it and like build your dream boards and so on and so forth. And do I think there's value in that?
Of course.
Yeah, because it controls where you focus. But ultimately, controlling where you focus is supposed to drive behavior change. So ultimately, you need the behavior change. And by the way, it's a back and forth relationship.
Damn right.
Like, if you change your behavior, then that changes where you focus. Or if you change your focus, that can change your behavior. So where I tend to put my time in is, because it's hard as hell to control your focus. Life is complicated.
Hell yeah.
So if I just control my behavior, that will eventually change the way I think, which will then drive more behavior change.
So with that said, and you kind of touched on your book, which I actually pre-ordered it. I'm looking forward to reading it.
Oh, dude, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I got it on the Kindle because I'm just trying. I got too many comic books and too many books everywhere, so I'm trying to just keep myself nice and in one device.
By the way, I'm actually, and this is open invitation to you or anyone listening, I'm having a launch party for it on January 15th.
Oh, nice.
So if you want to come get a signed physical copy, location TBD, but you can find more info about it at tinyleapsbookparty.com.
Okay, cool. Excellent. I'm writing that down for the show notes for this episode. You were talking about the publishing process. To walk me through it now with the book. Like, obviously you were taking a lot of your practice that you've implemented on air and you're putting it to paper. And it's funny because it reminded me of Tim Ferriss's Tools of the Titans,
right,
in the way that you're approaching it, because I think that the way you've approached it is more grounded. You know what I mean? And to your point, there's not a safety net. Like, using Tim Ferriss as the example, he put this book out, but the dude's been doing podcasts for, X amount of time. He's got 3 books under his belt. So, if he puts out a book about, productivity and stuff like that, people are going to be inclined to check it out. But
the dude put out a cookbook and made it a bestseller. Like,
yep.
Let's be real here.
Yep. And
you've got influence when you are not a chef, but you can do that.
Damn right. And to with you, the process towards getting the book made, you've definitely been pretty transparent with it, and I know that you've had challenges along the way. I mean, you know, how did you get out of your own way to get the book out?
I didn't. Is the
Nice.
short of it.
Respect.
I had a total of 6 months to write it.
Okay.
I got the contract sometime in 2017, and it was due January. I ended up getting a 1 month extension, handed it in February.
Wow.
I wrote most of it in 3 months.
Wow.
And so, and this isn't necessarily anything new. This has always been how I've operated. I was the classic kid that waited until the night before kind of thing.
Yep. I'm with you.
And that tends to honestly be like, I've tried the do it little by little thing. I just can't do it. It just doesn't work for me. So what I've had to do to sort of hack around that is, instead of waiting till the night before, like, dedicate a large chunk of time where it's the only thing I'm doing. And so for the book, that ended up being the last 3 months, and every single moment I had, I was writing. So
Wow.
whether I was sitting on the subway, like, there was a period of time where I was heading into work, I'd
Writing.
bring my laptop with me, pull out my laptop on the subway, a thing that I still feel weird about, because I don't know who these people are.
Hell
But
yeah.
I needed to sit down and write. So that hour-long commute I had back and forth every single day became writing time.
Okay.
When I was in the bathroom, I'd pull out my phone, and I was writing everything on Google Docs, so I could pull it up anywhere
Nice.
and write. And so
Very smart.
over the course of these, like, very small moments wherever I could find it, plus then staying up ridiculously late every night and waking up really early, I was able to get it done. And it was a tough process, man. To this day, like, I will write another book, but to this day, this is one of the hardest things I've, like, produced. This is one of the most difficult things I've had to sit down and create, simply because it didn't come naturally to me. And the only rule for myself was, I didn't want to do what most podcasters do, which is, we're going to get old episodes transcribed, and organize it, and then make a book out of it. That's not a book. That's just a written podcast.
Absolutely.
And so my rule for myself was, we're going to take the core of the show, the core message, which is, all big changes come from the tiny leaps you take every day.
Yep.
That is the core philosophy. From there, we're going to look at it from a different angle. And so the book and the podcast become two separate entities that support each other and are complements to each other, but do not derive from each other.
Right.
And so the podcast job is to look at that philosophy from the day-to-day behavior change. Here are the things you can do.
Right.
The book's job is to explore why it is we now know what to do, and I'm telling you what to do on the show, but you're still not doing it. Like, what is that gap? Why aren't you taking action? And so we look really deep into some of the psychology behind it, some of the studies that have been done behind it, debunk some myths like the need for passion and so on and so forth. And through interviewing people, through my own experiences, and through research that other people have done, I create a thesis for how we can start to bridge that gap and start to take more action on the things we know we should do.
You know, with the way that you're approaching it, it's almost, I like to look at it like, you ever seen the movie Beetlejuice?
Yeah.
Where they gave him the handbook for the recently deceased.
Oh yeah.
So I look at it that way, because, you know, in life, there are certain things you read that they end up kind of shaping who you become, you know, and in the way that you're approaching it, I think that it's the right approach, because what happens is, especially when you said you want to debunk a lot of stuff, because again, there's so much information coming your way from so many different sources nowadays, that all of a sudden, you know, 100 podcasts under your belt, 3 ebooks, and you become an expert, you know. Maybe there's or, you know, it's like Dr. Oz. Everybody takes what he says with, you know, as if it's, you know, gospel, because the guy's on TV, he's put out a bunch of books, but he's had instances where people have said, hey, you know, XYZ thing that you said was bullshit, you know, and it's happened. And I think that the way you're approaching this is just a genuine way to do it, because like you said, it's not podcast notes in a book. It's
right.
genuine strategies and ways to just be a better self, unleash your strongest self, you know. And I think that that in doing it that way, it's just a better message across the board, you know, and I definitely want to commend you for doing that.
I appreciate that. And I mean, it's something, and I want to make sure I state this because I think one of the big issues I have with personal development and self-help is whoever is talking says, hey, this is the way you need to do it.
Yep.
Like, this is what works. And I want to say that my approach to it works for me and the people who listen to me.
Right.
But if you're super into the metaphysical side and the manifestation and the crystals and blah, 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 do you, baby boo.
That's it.
I'm not going to stop you. Whatever works for you is what works for you. Like, it all works. Taking action is ultimately what matters. And so whatever gets you to take that action, I really don't care.
Yep.
It's more so whose method works for you. And so if it's mine, awesome. And I appreciate you. If it's Tony's, go for it. If it's Mel Robbins, if it's Lewis Howes, if it's any of the other people you can think of in this space, I really don't care. Just do something. And that's ultimately what's going to create the changes you want in your life. And that's all I really care about is, do you have a better life or not?
No, it's true. I think that at the end of the day, it's not about what, you know, you being at the dance. It's about what got you to the dance in the first place. And,
Absolutely.
And that's the thing that so many people, and that's why I asked you about, you know, getting out of your own way, because it's exactly that. You want, by you putting out a book, you're telling people like, hey, you haven't done this. Why? Oh, I haven't done this because I hate my job. Okay, well, let's deconstruct why you hate your job. You know, is it because you don't make enough money? All right, well, if you don't make enough money, go and sell stuff on eBay. Buy stuff at the dollar store, sell stuff on eBay, make extra money to the point where you offset taking a lesser paying job that'll put a smile on your face. You know, whatever it is. Yeah. But sometimes people need to be told that. And I think that the way you're looking at it is just the right way to do it, because some people, they need that, you know, and I hate using this because like the John Lee Dumas, the aha moment, you know, they need that. And, you know, it's in a way though, it's true, because I think, and you know, you can definitely correct me on this. I think the way you want to approach this is you want people to read this book and realize like, hey, maybe this isn't working because maybe I was looking at it wrong and I just need a different set of eyes, and your book is a different set of eyes.
Yeah. And, that's, I think that's 100% the right way to categorize it, honestly.
You know, it's crazy. And I wanted to ask, you know, when it came time for you to get this book published and, you know, you got your contract, how did you approach that when you walked in? You know, did you go, hey, I do this. This is how I want to do it. How was the pitch?
Yeah. Yeah. So here's the thing. This is the part I can't give any advice on whatsoever.
Go ahead. No, it's your story.
They came to me.
Get out of here. Really? That's cool, man.
Yeah. They came to me. One of the editors listens to my show. And so
that's phenomenal.
It worked out. They were looking for a book in this category. She said, hey, I listened to this show. Let me see if he has an idea for a book. She emailed me. I almost deleted the email thinking, no freaking way is this happening. Then finally I was like, all right, let me see what this is about. And I'll be honest, when last June, I didn't even have an idea for a book. I knew one day I wanted a book. I knew that the show would eventually become a book, but I assumed that was 5 years out. And so it wasn't even remotely on my mind. It was just one of those things that sometimes opportunities pop up that you say yes and figure it out. And so they said, hey, we want to take on your book. Can you send us a proposal for what it would be so I can pitch it to the rest of the team? You have until Friday. And so every night that week, I sat my ass down and figured out what this book should be, wrote up the proposal, which by itself was like 20 something pages.
Wow.
And sent it in, and they bought it. And so now I have a book.
You know, it's funny. As you said, you were writing, you were putting together the proposal. I was going to ask, did you start writing the proposal Thursday night based on what we were talking about?
Well, so here's the thing. 1 week is basically the night before.
Yep.
Or something like that.
Yep.
So it worked out really well. But, one of the things, I guess if there was any advice I would give is that you have way more negotiation power when they approach you.
Tremendous.
So whatever you need to do to make that possible, whether that is creating a podcast or blogging or doing videos, like building an audience, because ultimately what they care about. And that's where I think my unique strength in this space comes from is I boil things down to what actually matters here.
Yep.
Ultimately, what they care about is, can you sell copies?
That's it.
They don't actually care about how good the book is. They don't actually care about any of the subjective things.
Yep.
They care about, can you sell copies?
Yep, the end game.
They're not going to sell it for you. And so if we go to the extreme of it, whatever your topic is, let's say you want to be the number one best-selling New York Times author of a book on knitting. Like, if you had 1 million people saying, hey, we want a book on knitting, and you approached a publisher, they would say yes and give you a deal because you have a potential 1 million sales. Now, are you going to get 1 million? Absolutely not. That's us going to the extreme of it.
Right.
But if we go to the extreme and know that in this scenario, this is absolutely 100% true, well, we can reverse engineer that to something that is practical. So could you get 100,000? Could you get 3,000? Could you get 500? Like, we just lower the number to something that you can actually reach. But we still know that as long as that the ultimate truth of it is, if you have an audience that is willing to buy your book, a publisher will give you a deal for it because they want that money.
Now,
so that's the biggest advice I can give is, don't go about it in the same way that you shouldn't go about applying to jobs in the traditional way.
Nope.
Like you should network and so on and so forth. Don't go about getting a publishing deal in the traditional way. Like, give them a reason to give a crap about you. Make it an easy yes to say.
Make yourself a thought leader. Or a subject matter expert. That's, to hear that, it's proof positive that, you gotta chip away at what you want to do and not go for the get rich quick, like it's not going to happen.
Wait around and hope that because you have this great manuscript that somebody's going to give you a deal one day. They don't care who you are or what the book is about.
I saw that there's an audiobook version of the book also coming out. How'd that work out with getting an audiobook version? Did you?
So yeah, it was written into the original contract, and the only thing I made sure of was that I was the one reading it.
Nice.
Because typically publishers don't let the author do it.
I've heard, yeah.
Because I'm a podcaster, it just makes sense.
Damn right.
So that was really that wasn't a big lift either. It was. They wanted to own the rights to the distribution of the book itself and the distribution of the audiobook. All I changed in the contract was that I got final say on marketing stuff and would be consulted on things like graphics and so on and so forth. And that was purely just to make sure that I'm safeguarding the representation of the brand.
Now,
it was an easy thing.
Did you do that? Did you do the contract review yourself? Did you hire an attorney? Just because these are things people might be curious about if they're on their own path.
Yeah, so I would hire an attorney. I would 100% recommend that. I personally didn't. So I read through the entire thing myself, but my girlfriend also works in publishing. She just got a master's in publishing, has been in publishing for a ridiculous amount of time.
You had a ringer.
part of her job was reviewing contracts. So it just worked out that she was able to help me get clear on what's supposed to be in it and what's not. But had I not had that, I would have 100% hired an attorney. And you can get somebody, you can get it on rocketlawyer.com or something like that. Get it digital and save a few bucks not having to go to an office, so on and so forth.
Nice. All right. But before we jump into the next part of it, I did want to tell you that, what you're doing and the way you're approaching it, man, just stay the course. Don't let anything get in the way of that, because you've taken your experiences and you've shaped them into tools and actionable intel for people that are out there in similar situations. Like I said, I've been in the game for a minute, but I still got actionable intel from the content you put out. Don't ever change that.
I appreciate that, man.
Cause that's the driving force, and like I said, we've been connected for years, and then, we reconnected just based on other content. And I'm like, man, Gregg's out there killing it. Like he's out there really, really putting foot to gas, and, not too many people are out there doing that, because either they need to get jump started, they need that kick in the ass, but you're out there doing it, man. And, don't let anybody sell you short that you're not working hard, because you definitely are, and people see it.
Appreciate that, dude. Definitely appreciate that.
So the next part of our show we like to go into is the hot seat, a bunch of rapid fire questions, nothing too crazy. A lot of it ties into, you know, the tech aspect of what your content is, but there's some lighthearted stuff in there also. You know, you were talking about that you write on your phone. What phone are you using to do your writing?
So at the time, I believe I was on a oh no, I had just switched. So I'm on the Note 8.
Note fan.
Note 8.
Nice.
Yeah, I switched from iPhone for this one. I do love it, but it's a little bit too big.
Nice.
It's one of those things where you can't hold it with one hand and text comfortably.
Yep.
So I'm always terrified of it falling.
Yeah.
So I wish it was a tiny bit smaller.
Yep. And you beat me to it, because that was actually the next I was going to ask what you like or dislike about the device, because I too was a former Note user, and when the 7 started to blow up, I made the jump back into Apple's embrace. And even though I missed the pen dearly, because I actually used it. I really
I
did.
use it all the time.
Exactly. And that's what it is. Like, I'm like, I miss just being able to write a note on the screen real quick. Oh man, it's funny how that works out. And you did all your writing, you were saying, through Google Docs, right on the phone, right? And then you just continue on your desktop?
Yep. And whenever I got sick of typing, I would switch to Google Docs. Has a fantastic voice to text software built in.
Wow.
Like, it's ridiculously accurate.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, I discovered it because I felt like I couldn't keep typing at one point. So I would just switch between inputs based on where I was at or what I need to do to keep going.
When you turn on your phone every day, where's the first place you go?
Unfortunately, either email or Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at my home screen, there's 3 apps, literally, like my 3 most used apps that are. It's actually interesting. I'm so glad you asked this, because I'm looking at my screen and they are right where my thumb lands. Like, they're in line right where my thumb lands. So it's no surprise that they're my most 3. It's Messages, Gmail, and Instagram.
Okay. On your desktop or a laptop, for most used program?
Probably Adobe Audition.
Nice. You're in Audition. You use Audition for the podcast then?
Yeah.
Nice. I'm starting to learn it, so definitely a bit of a learning curve, just because I want to have it in the toolkit, you know, just like everything else. So it's good to know that you use Audition, and you know, your stuff comes out crispy, man. So I know you're knocking it out of the park with that. Like I said, you know, we were talking about Hindenburg before we started recording, but Audition is nice, man. It's just, for me, I'm like, oh no.
Yeah, I came from an Adobe background.
Oh, okay.
So the layout made a lot of sense. Like, when I my first foray into media production was video, and my school taught Premiere Pro, so that's sort of where I started. Like, I've never used Vegas or any of the others.
Wow.
And now it's just the Adobe does a really good job of taking the same experience and applying it to a different medium.
Okay.
So you feel like you already know it, even if it's the difference between editing audio and video or editing a photo and video. Like, you still feel like you know how it works.
Outside of your own content, what's one website you recommend to people often?
That is a good one. You know, I struggle with this because I find myself spending most of my time on consuming content through social platforms.
Really?
So I actually can't even remember the last blog that I went to.
Wow.
I typically spend most of my time on YouTube or Twitch.
Okay.
And Facebook begrudgingly. But yeah, that's a good one.
You have a favorite YouTuber then, if that's the case? Reframe the question a bit.
I'm obsessed with politics lately.
Oh, okay.
The last 2 years. And I categorize myself as a progressive, so I'm a big fan of Secular Talk, the Young Turks, and Minority Report. So I typically just have something from them on rotation most days.
Yeah, I've seen some of the Young Turk stuff, man. I usually envy their studio setup.
Oh, right.
I
wish I had that setup.
Yeah, man. I go, man, those guys are, you know, because of course, like anything else with, you know, it's funny you talk about politics with Facebook. You know, usually from November through January, I mute anybody who talks about politics, but, and I mean talking about politics in a divisive sort of way,
Of course.
you know, because what happens is sometimes the people who you're friends with, you don't really know them, and then you're like, wow, that's what you think about that?
Yeah, right.
And
Yeah,
then,
it's like earth shattering.
yeah. So I'm like,
because like, to your point, like, so I consider myself a progressive. Like, I'm a fan of Medicare for all and blah, blah, blah.
mhm.
But if somebody is a conservative, I don't have a problem with them by default.
Right.
I have a problem when they then take it to the next level of, you're a piece of crap
Yep.
because you believe
Because of
in
your
these things.
ideology.
And that's like, okay, well, now we can't necessarily relate to each other at all because we can't even be civil. Like, that's a problem.
Yep. That's
So
the scary part.
when I start to mute or unfriend and that sort of thing.
Yep. And that's why I'm glad we reframed it to ask about, whose YouTube content you're consuming, because now with the advent of video, man, the amount of people that are, quote unquote political, it's insane. Everybody wants to be
Dude.
John Oliver, everybody
Yeah,
wants to be
it's really
the Young
crazy.
Turks.
Everyone is getting into it now. And you almost can't not, or you almost like can't avoid it.
Nope, you can't.
Like, I create self-help content and sometimes things that happen politically, because really what I try to talk about is like all the different factors that affect behavior. And obviously politics and economics plays a big role in that. And so I find myself like having to ask this question of, should I weigh in or not, quite
Mhm.
often. And typically I choose no, but
Right
I
there
can
with you.
very easily see a scenario where like I have to, because it so directly affects human behavior. And now all of a sudden I'm a talking head.
Yep. I stop myself often, as a minority, because sometimes, people will write something and they'll, they'll write some sort of, this thing, that thing, some sort of, Trump thing or whatever. And I'll just be like, listen, man. And this is all I'll ever say. I'll be like, listen, just remember, you're not native here either. Like that's the thing I always tell people. It's like, and not to even go political, but I always tell people, it's like, listen, you can't complain about people about Mexican descent because they were here first.
True.
You can't
Very
complain. It's like,
Very true.
if anybody has any right to throw us out, it's them and people that are Native American, period.
Yeah.
And that's it. We're all either brought here by force, brought here by force, or brought here with the promise of a better life. That's pretty much it. And so, that's how I always try to look at it. And I stop myself for that exact reason. Like you said, like sometimes you don't want to become a talking head, or you don't want to become a person that drives an agenda, and that's the thing. That's the worst part, especially us as content creators. We get pushed into that so often. Like, oh, you're pushing an agenda. It's like, real quick, I said something about, a female journalist being attacked on a podcast. This was a few years back, and somebody wrote in comments, oh, this guy's pushing
Was this the Gamergate?
Yes. And I was a feminist that, you're pushing a feminist agenda.
Yeah.
And I said, listen, man, I wouldn't want my sisters, my mother, or whatever to be called, a slut or whatever because they put out their, you know what I mean? Like they share their opinion with the world. That's not being a feminist. It's just being human. You know what I mean? Like that's exactly what it was. And people were like, yeah, man. And I'm like, that's, it's not even, I didn't even want, a glowing endorsement for that. It's like, it's just being human,
Yeah.
That's the scary part. Favorite piece of tech besides your phone or your computer?
So I'm going to use the word gear, but what I mean is the collective gear of cameras, microphone. Like I am upset. I have a problem with buying equipment.
Amen.
It is the happiest day in the world to me.
Hell yeah.
When I get to open something new. So
nice.
I'll just use the term gear to represent everything.
Nice. Do you work, with music or without music? And what are you listening to when you are?
So typically with, and I listen to one of three things. So I'm a big fan of, on YouTube, they're starting to pop up all these channels that are live 24/7.
Okay.
Music channels. So I listen to a lot of lo-fi hip hop. That's actually I find it really, really calming. Allows you to sort of get into your head and work. If I need to be pumped up and I'm drinking coffee at the same time, I listen to dubstep or trap. And that's like, that thing is like taking adrenaline and pumping it directly into your veins. Like nice. I lose my freaking mind when dubstep and specifically when it's combined with coffee. I don't know why, but And then the third thing is I'm a big fan lately of listening to albums. So when an album drops by somebody I'm following, like wanting to experience the full album, whereas just a couple years ago, like I didn't really care that much about it. So yeah, it's one of those three things depending on where I'm at.
Are you consuming your albums through a streaming service? Are you buying albums the old fashioned way?
Spotify.
Nice. You know, some people still like the feel of a CD.
About to invest in a record player. I want to
really
start buying some vinyls. Yeah, I got obsessed over the summer. My girlfriend's family and I went to Cape Cod. We stayed in this Airbnb, and they had this record player in the corner. I just got obsessed with it.
That's crazy, man. I have a garage full of like my mom's old records, and my brother, he's a lot older than me. He has a lot of. I remember he had the record for the movie Metropolis.
Oh wow!
And it unfolds. The cover unfolds into like a giant robot. I was so tripped out with that stuff when I was a kid, man. So it's cool. It's cool to hear that, seeing vinyl as a resurgence, but also appreciating that you can just consume it digitally, which is nice.
Yeah, for sure.
You mentioned Twitch before, so clearly you're a gamer. What are you playing?
A ton of Fortnite, as is the rest of the world. And not currently playing, but go on and off every 6 months or so. I've been playing World of Warcraft since release.
Wow.
So what is that, like 14 years of my life?
Jeez. Very cool. If that's the case, then if you're playing Fortnite, I would ask that what was your last gaming purchase, but clearly that was Fortnite.
Yeah, it probably was a skin of some type.
Oh, okay. What's an item you've purchased recently that's less than $100 that's made your life easier or more enjoyable? Could be anything.
Oh, you know what? So my girlfriend bought it for me. This water bottle. So I'm going to sound like an idiot, but I'll go with it. So it's from this brand Hydra Peak.
Okay.
And she got it at Marshall's. I think it was maybe $20. But this thing keeps water so damn cold for so damn long. And
nothing wrong with that.
It's incredible. Like I know how it works. I understand the tech. It's nothing magical. But I look at this thing and I like have it sitting there for hours, and I take a sip and it's ice cold. I'm like, this is why Harry Potter exists. Like this is what he's doing, and I'm totally okay with it.
I'm glad you mentioned it because now I got to look for one because usually this is what ends up happening. Now that I work from home, I end up getting large bottles of water from like Trader Joe's. I bring the water in my office. I'm like, all right, I'm going to start drinking it. I start drinking it. It gets warm. Then it sits there. I get annoyed. I put it back in the fridge, and I'll grab the next coldest thing, whether it's a Monster or an iced coffee or whatever. You know what I mean? And then it's like the water sits there, and it's like a bunch of half-open bottles of water getting cold. So, that's a brand I'm going to have to take a look at then.
Yeah, this thing has been awesome. There's a bunch of brands that do a similar thing. It's like it can keep things warm too if I wanted to put tea or soup or something in it.
Nice.
But I typically only use it for water.
All right. So obviously we've talked tech. Obviously the title is Toys and Tech of the Trade. What was your favorite toy growing up?
So my cousins and I, we're super close growing up. Like I consider them like brothers, and we played with Dragon Ball Z toys all the time.
Nice.
Like my favorite was the Teen Gohan toy.
Oh, okay.
And so pretty much every day, we didn't even have like sets or anything like that. Like we literally just have the toys and make up fights, and like it was just awesome.
Very cool.
So for a while we had like every single character.
Man, it's funny because I got into Dragon Ball Super recently. And yeah, I started buying like the statues. Like, there's a couple Dragon Ball statues in my office now. I'm like, oh man, I got out of this stuff. Like after Dragon Ball Z and the tape trading.
And they dragged me in.
Oh man. And same thing with the Funko Pops. Like I got into them and then it got a little crazy and now I'm downsizing my collection and, all my Dragon Ball ones are out of the box and on display. So very, very cool to see that. You're not collecting anything in that space now anymore though, right?
No,
okay.
not typically, but I have been, really interested in starting up a side business that basically just buys and resells different anime characters.
Nice.
Because there's a massive market for it. But I need to do a little bit more research just because I've never operated in that space or really even in e-commerce, but it's something I'm interested in.
When I was a teenager, I worked in a comic book store, and I remember my boss said to me, he goes, where do you get all this cool anime stuff? And I told him, Chinatown. So he took a train ride with me, and I took him to like the place where I do my tape trading, when Dragon Balls used to be on tape, on just cassettes with bad dubbing or with poor subtitles, and, places where I would go and buy, Gundam statues and things like that. So, and the old, cloth Dragon Ball Z wall scrolls.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I remember he bought a bunch of them to resell them in the comic book store. He was like, "Oh, we're gonna take a trip once a month down there."
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was crazy because the comic book store was in Flushing, which is a predominantly Asian area. So the minute we started selling like Dragon Ball and Yu Yu Hakusho and Fist of the North Star stuff, it just became a different revenue stream. So if you're looking to get into that space, man, it's a fun space to get into, and then now there's so many different companies putting stuff out that there's a niche there. So
yeah, there is. And I mean, I'm a huge anime fan. Like I'm the type of guy who like sits and cries at different shows, and it's a big part of my life. So I'd love to do something in that world.
What are you watching currently?
I've got shows on rotation, boy. So Log Horizon, I'm rewatching. The current shonen stuff, so the My Hero Academia.
Yep, I'm watching that.
I'm actually watching a wrestling show that's new this season on Crunchyroll. Sumo wrestling, rather.
Oh, right.
So even more niche than regular wrestling. But I found myself, I never thought I'd be into sports anime until I watched this show called Baby Steps.
Okay.
That was about tennis. And it's just this dude who gets into tennis, and like he's very, very like mathematic. So he figures out how to use that as a strength, and the standard like anime arc of, hey, he's getting better. But it really got me into it. So after that, I started watching Haikyuu, the volleyball show, and Ace of, I can't even remember the name, but it's a baseball show. Ace of Diamonds, that's it. And now I'm watching a sumo wrestling show. So I'm just falling deeper and deeper into the hole.
Very cool.
I'm watching Attack on Titan, Shokugeki, a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I gotta.
You know what actually is the most standout show to me of this season? This is recording fall, soon to be winter 2018. It's called That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. And I avoided this show because of the name. I avoided it for so long, and I finally just ran out of stuff to watch. It's like, fine, let's see it. This is the greatest show of the season.
Oh, man.
Like, it's going to go down as one of the best anime of all time, no doubt. Unless they screw it up.
Oh, now I got to check that out. I just finished.
It's so good.
I finished One Punch Man, and I just became obsessed with it. So I ended up buying like the pops from One Punch Man, and the intro music is a ringtone.
Mob Psycho?
No, I haven't.
So it's the same creator, Mob Psycho 100, and it's a similar concept. I would recommend it.
All right, so I'm gonna check that out. All right, so that takes us out of the hot seat. The last thing we like to do, just to provide value, I like to call it reach one, teach one. As someone who's run the gamut, published a book, put out music, content creation, you're an entrepreneur. With someone looking to just jump into it and carve out their own niche with their own thing, what's one piece of advice you could give?
Spend a lot of time figuring out who you are. A lot of people are starting to say this message, but it's something that the minute I finally decided to do it has really helped. So I'm a big fan of Donald Glover, for example. And for those of you who don't know, he does everything, or has done everything. He's done a stand-up. He's done music really successfully. He is a director and show creator now. He was a comedian for a while. And I'm incredibly impressed at his ability to do these things at the same time and do them well. And that's always, I think, what has resonated with me, is this understanding that if I was doing a single thing, I would lose my mind. Like, I would just be bored to tears and not motivated to do anything. And so, unfortunately, though, the overarching message in society right now is that you need to become a specialist. You need to double down and pick your thing and get great at it. And that's how you increase your rates and yada, yada, yada. And so for a very long time, I tried to do that. I tried to become this specialist and basically cram the square peg into the round hole. And at some point, I decided to start prioritizing getting to know myself and understanding what it was I needed, what I thrived on, what allowed me to perform well, and what was going on in my life when I was doing the best. And that absolutely changed everything, because the minute I stopped trying to be a specialist and just owned the fact that I am, in fact, a jack of all trades, master of none type, and that there are benefits to that and drawbacks to that. And if I understand those things, then I can build a life around it. Things started to change. So that's my biggest advice: is take the time getting to know yourself, take the time to understand who you are and what you need. And once you figure those things out, like, go do that and stop worrying about what society says you're supposed to do.
Nice. It's funny. I used the term autodidact, which is a self-taught person.
Yeah.
I even have that in my LinkedIn for that exact reason. Like, that's in my LinkedIn, like, first thing, like, listen, I am this. This is what I am. I know a bunch of stuff. Some of it's documented through schooling. Some of it isn't. So, talk to me, find out who I am, get to know who I am, and I can provide you some value, instead of just check off this box. Do you know this? What about this? It's like, I like that message, because you're telling people, just don't put yourself in one box or check off one box,
Yeah. And by the way, like, if that's how you work, then do it. Put yourself into that box and check it off. You don't need to be a generalist. You can be a specialist if that's how you are.
Yep.
But you need to know, is that how you are, and not just be doing it because somebody told you, well, you need to be a specialist or you need to be a generalist.
There you go.
And that's where I think the power is, in understanding what are you actually, and then after that, turning off the outside influences and just doing that.
There you go. All right. Now, last but not least, of course, where can people find you, keep up with your work, consume your content?
So the easiest thing, you're already listening to a podcast. So wherever you're consuming this, just search Tiny Leaps, Big Changes. Give that a listen. It's my show. There are 314 or 15 episodes. And more are coming. Like, this show is going to go for a little while. Beyond that, if you want a free chapter of the book, or if you want to pick it up, if you want to pre-order it, you can go to tinyleapsbook.com, tinyleapsbook.com, and you can just enter your email. I'll send you a free chapter, or there's a link there that'll take you to all the places that you can pre-order it. And if you are New York City based and you want to attend the launch party, meet me, have a conversation, get the book signed, so on and so forth. Location TBD, but you can learn more at tinyleapsbookparty.com.
Nice. All right, my friend Gregg, I appreciate you for taking the time to share the toys and tech of your trade.
Dude, thank you so much for having me. This was an absolute blast.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it, brother. All right, that wraps up our interview with Gregg Clunis, host of the Tiny Leaps Big Changes podcast and author of Tiny Leaps Big Changes, Everyday Strategies to Accomplish More, Crush Your Goals, and Create the Life You Want. That book is currently available on Amazon and at local bookstores. And of course, links for the book, the podcast, and also for the mixtape that Gregg made will be in the show notes for this episode. There's also going to be links for some of the items that we discussed, and full transparency, some of those might be affiliate links where we receive a small commission if you use that link to purchase the item that is being discussed. That commission goes towards improving, obviously, RageWorks, whether it's our audio, video, or our web presence. As always, if you use that link, we really, really appreciate it. Last but not least, if you're interested in being a guest on a future episode of Toys and Tech of the Trade, you can email me, rich@rageworks.net, or use the contact form on the site. If you want to engage with us on social media, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, with Facebook and Instagram being our primary platforms of choice. But as always, you can just visit rageworks.net and keep up to date with all of the stuff we talk about, whether it's toys or tech. We appreciate Gregg taking the time to share the toys and tech of his trade. And as always, Toys and Tech of the Trade is your one-stop shop for toys, tech, and talk with some assembly required. I'll catch you guys on the next episode. Thank you guys for listening. Peace.